International Music Network and the She Rocks Awards. And I'm really stoked to be here today to talk about branding and social media and using those tools to further your brand and many other things. I'm also VP of Marketing for Positive Grid, which is a great MI industry company, and singer-songwriter and musician and crazy person. So thanks for joining us. I would just ask anybody who is watching, just keep your videos muted. But now I'd like the panel to introduce themselves. So I'm going to start off with Sarah. Why don't you share a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I am originally from Florida. I graduated from Berkeley almost 10 years ago, and I studied music production and engineering. I've been out in LA for 6 or 7 years now doing music marketing for music labels such as BMG, and I've been doing marketing for audio companies like Native Instruments. And now I'm working more just for myself, just working with producers, artists, film scores, publishers, doing marketing campaigns for them.
Okay, awesome. Okay, Danny, how about you? Why don't you share a bit about your background?
I'm based out in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm the founder of Female Frequency. We started out by making an album made entirely by women, and now we provide support for other organizations like Sound Girls and host workshops about music production. I'm also the vice president of Grind Ethos Records, and I provide support for artists, record labels, and other industries for social media management, web design, graphic design, and everything else related to that.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. And finally, Catherine, why don't you share a bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Catharine Wood, and I am based out here in Los Angeles. I'm a composer, producer, engineer with a studio in Eagle Rock, which is northeast of downtown by about 15 minutes. I guess I graduated from the Los Angeles Recording School in 2005, so quite a while ago, with a bachelor's degree before that. And I've just been, pretty much since I graduated in 2005, I've been full-time engineering.
Awesome. Well, I think it's really interesting how everybody in this panel has like multiple titles after their name. There's like no one way to get by in this crazy business.
True.
Yeah. So I want to start off by talking about branding, what branding is, and the importance of branding. And I have a lot of thoughts about that, but I'd like to hear from our panel first. So does anybody want to jump in and just talk about from their perspective, perhaps, like what branding means to you and why you think it's important, especially today?
I guess I'll start. So from a branding perspective, what stands out to me is what a company represents. So who they are, who their voice is, what their core values are. And that's something that's not spoken about a lot in the music industry, especially now with Black Lives Matters. I think we're seeing a lot of core values changing, and we're also seeing a lot of things that are not represented. So that's important for a lot of companies to know exactly what they stand for even before they launch.
Yeah, interesting. Anybody else have anything to add about this sort of general view of
Robin
branding?
Jenkins?
I think of
Join the meeting.
A shop front for me, for my business, for my studio. How do I present myself as a producer engineer? How do I present my studio as a studio that's sort of separate from me, but linked? So sort of carefully making sure that there's kind of a face to both of those. And yeah, I think of it as a shop front.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Danny? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with both Catherine and Sarah. And, I would say as far as branding, really just figuring out what you want your message to be and figuring out the different parts of you and how to portray that message to your audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think when I think about branding, I kind of think about like what makes you memorable, what differentiates you from somebody else in the same or similar field, and like how does who you are like and what you do build trust with who you're trying to convey that to. So like being it's sort of like that central thing that you are trying to be true to and get across to people in many ways. And we'll touch on that, like branding can, how you brand your service or who you are can mean a lot of things. Let's talk a little bit about best practices for branding. Like, how do you figure out like what your brand is? Does anybody have any thoughts on that sort of discovery idea about what you did to create your brand, or tips for other people?
I think it's about simplifying, at least for when you're doing it for a person.
Mhm.
I'm not sure really how one would do it for a brand, although, and that's like a company.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge undertaking. I think for people, keeping it simple, keeping it authentic, and kind of staying on message. So I had a friend approach me and say, "Did you realize all of your posts are about?" It was something like, all my pictures were like feet, like I was like my flip flops for some reason, or my dog, or flowers, which have nothing to do with engineering, and it's just kind of like, hello, it's like, oh, okay, like the rest of the world has no idea what I do or what my background is. So why don't I tell them in a concise way that it's just a little bit of the why. Why do I engineer? Why did I build a studio? Why did I do these things? And then that engages people to want to learn more, maybe work with you, whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody else have some thoughts on that?
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Sarah.
I think for me, it was a journey because I had started my company and it was very difficult to figure out what my brand was. But it was something I kind of had to let grow. I had a good starting point as to why I wanted to do it. And it was to help women, especially, figure out their next path, their next step in the music industry. And that's not something that a lot of people do. A lot of people just take someone's money and run, but they don't lay out the foundations. So I think once you have an idea of what you want to do, sometimes you have to let it grow and see like your audience responses. And sometimes that will define your brand, I guess. So for me, it took about a year to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Danny. Do you have something
Yeah.
to add?
And I think it's also to add to that, figuring out what your skill set is, what you want to work at, and then also leaning on different partners around you. So figuring out, your network and how you can all uplift each other that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I've started multiple companies over the years. I just stopped my ad agency, my marketing agency, Mad Sun, to take this job I'm in now. But a lot of them just started out really organically. Same thing with the Women's International Music Network. I was just like, oh, women in the industry should get together. Like, we should have an event. Then we should do this. But when I look back, and I've done this as a consultant for Mad Sun, like there's a process to like figuring out your brand, and especially if you're a company, looking at, are there holes in the market that someone's not filling? Can I fill those? Does it feel like the right fit for me to fill those? How are other people talking about themselves that are in a similar market? How can I be different? What resonates? And some of that, I think, like if you don't really know where to start, I'm going to post. There's a really great article that I found about branding yourself as a musician, but I think it spills over into all areas. But it's just to talk to people. I mean, I find like I'm a talker. That I, might have a chat with somebody like, how do you see me? Like, what do you wish somebody was able to do in my space? Just kind of be open with people and start from there. And another thing that I've found is like, look at somebody that you admire that's in a similar space and kind of analyze, like, what are they doing for branding? How are they communicating about themselves and their services? And how, are they being consistent? What does their website look like? What are they doing? Just kind of look at and benchmark, what other people are doing, and see if, maybe you can adapt that to yourself or your services or whatever you're looking to do. So that's sort of my starting point typically. Typically, if I do it with a company, it's a ton of conversations. and there's a very long process to kind of hone in on, what's your brand statement? Who are you? What's your style, your attitude? How do you talk about things? What's your color? Any of that is part of branding. So there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. Which brings me to the next question, what are the elements of branding? I've given you some clues. So does anybody else want to talk about what they see as the elements of branding? Because for their business, it might be different from somebody else. Anybody have some thoughts about elements of branding? Nobody?
I think continuity is an important, whether it's your logo, whether it's, how do you use your Facebook with your Instagram? How often are you posting? What is the goal? Are you trying to, gain new business? Like what's the goal? And then how do you use those different platforms effectively together? I think that's a big part of it. And I think the aesthetic obviously should be, I think, a reflection for a person at least, or for the studio, like what's the vibe of the studio? How can I reflect that visually? How do I translate? If you meet me in person, is that what I'm kind of portraying on my social media? And, a little drop, because it's not the real thing, obviously, but those seem to be, important elements.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree completely, because if you have an actual food product, for instance, not like a service like we offer, but you see, Starbucks, but every single Starbucks you go to across the world is the same product, the same quality. It usually tastes the same. It's the same everything. So that's their brand. You know it when you see it, whether it's just the logo or if it's the colors. Same with McDonald's. That's what I remember growing up. Or even the clown, which is kind of scary, but everyone has their own branding.
Yeah, I mean, I think let's sort of move this into, what we're talking about, which is, music industry, audio industry, musicians. What do you think about specific components of a brand for, a musician or an audio professional? Anybody want to?
I think you pick what you're good at. What are you good? What as you said before, is there a hole that's not being filled in whatever it is? Whether it's for me, it would be location wise. Are there any female-owned studios in Eagle Rock? Yes, me. Are there? No, really. It's that sort of can I fill in this band here with myself? So, I think that's the, keeping focused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. And not even filling in that band, but also recognizing what is the significant, differentiator that's going to resonate with potential clients, right? So your location, that you're a woman, maybe the kind of music that you specialize in, what your facility offers to people, and then, and maybe it's not oh, I practice yoga every day. Maybe that's not part of your branding, but
right.
For some people it could be. I know musicians who teach yoga, and that's a huge part of who they are as a musician.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think part of it is interesting to look at all the aspects of yourself and what you're offering and think, does this contribute to what I'm trying to do with myself or my business?
That's
and
what
still find a way to use it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the stories also, at least for Instagram stories, that can be an outlet for those things to give people a broader image of who you are. Yes, I will talk about my workouts and the flowers and in my yard and things, on my story. I'm not going to post that on my my business page. I used to until I realized that no, don't do that for me. It, didn't paint the picture I wanted to be painting. So.
Does anyone else have anything to add, Beth?
I think for artists, you know, figuring out what genre you fit into, finding bands or musicians that you want to perform with or collaborate with, and kind of also like setting goals for different venues to network into helps to kind of find your brand that way as well.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting what you said, Catherine, because I have this friend, Allie Handel. I don't know if you guys know her. She's a singer-songwriter, guitar player, and she's like really into cats. And so her on her socials, but also on her website, she has like a whole like separate area of her blog about cats, which I think is kind of fun because, you know, it's a way for somebody to get to know you in another way,
Yes.
as long as it like fits with what you're trying to do,
Yeah.
you know. So I think I want to say like maybe it was Paul Gilbert. I was on his site one time and he had this really funny blog on his site. It had nothing to do with guitar or anything, but I was mesmerized by it. I was like, oh my God, like this guy is crazy. And it kept me engaged. So maybe helped me get to know his personality a little better outside of being a guitar player. So, you know, there's some interesting things you can do. Even as a business, I've been shopping for some services and I've been looking at a lot of websites and you see like some very interesting blogs and information and things that people share. So, okay. So I have some questions that people submitted, and one of them was, how about some advice for branding for freelancers on how to handle branding yourself to show a variety of skill sets across the industry? And I think that is a challenge, you know. Okay, we all mentioned like 5 things that we do. Like, how do you get across those things, but still be able to have like a unified brand? You guys have any thoughts about that?
That's something that I struggle with, and I'm still trying to figure out the best way to present it. But what's worked for me so far is with the multiple skill sets, you do have to present it in a way that your clients will be able to digest it easily. So what I've done is kind of classify things into groups. So it's like your marketing and branding. I have like music business / publishing, I guess you could call it. And I have some other subject lines as well, but that seems to make things more simplistic than have everything completely in its own section. But at the same time, all of those do come together to offer like a complete package, I guess, for marketing, for consulting to my clients.
Does anyone else?
I agree.
thought?
For me, I focus on Grind Ethos Records for anybody that I'm working with, for helping out with social media marketing and websites and everything like that. And I'm also an artist under the name Primitive Heart. I have a synth pop project for that. So sometimes when I'm working with an artist, you know, halfway through a campaign or something, I might have something to share with them of my experience as an artist then, but I don't really reveal that right off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, I also struggle with it. Like, I have distinctive websites and social media accounts for different businesses, which is a lot of work to maintain, depending on the project. I have people helping me, but I also, in my signature, my email signature, I list everything that I do. And it's really surprising how many people will read my signature and be like, oh, I didn't know you did this too. Like, I do this. Like, this is a cool connection. It's really, that's like my only, well, that's one of the ways I tie them together. In my bio on each site, it will usually mention the other things, and sometimes there's cross links, but it is really hard to sort of unify all that. I like Sarah's idea of having like categories and maybe like a unified message that sort of branches off in different directions. But, you know, I think with any skill set, you have to still differentiate like why, you know, somebody would want you, what you're offering, what's special about it, what's good, what's your background. So you have to be able to tell that story. Okay, let's see. I think a lot of us are probably thinking about this next question. How can you rebrand yourself to cross over into a new industry or role? And one sort of example I had of this was, like I have a friend who's a writer, and he's like, it's really hard to get work as a writer right now. because everybody's getting laid off. So I was like, oh, well, why don't you rebrand yourself as a content creator, not a writer? Because everybody needs content. Maybe it's just as simple as like rethinking, like, what does your skill set address in something that's in demand? You guys have any other thoughts about rebranding and things people can do?
I think, obviously live streaming is becoming very important. So that's something that I've been working with different artists and record labels to help them, prepare for that and know how to do live streams and things like that.
I think getting good audio for live streaming is like a huge in demand thing. Like if somebody could
Yeah.
offer a service that helps people get good audio, like I don't know, people need that. Maybe that's part of it, like recognizing like what's the new need, can I address that? Anybody else have some thoughts on that? Rebranding is hard because it shifts like the paradigm of what you think about yourself, what you offer. And sometimes it's really hard to walk away from that last thing. But yes, my advice would be to examine like what's in demand now. Do I have a skill that can meet that? And what I said, anybody could crack the good audio for live streaming? Not, because Zoom is terrible for that. Okay, we had a question. How do you develop your image or logo in order to brand yourself for social media? So I guess some people want some like more specific advice about creating like branding, collateral or elements that they can use. Does anybody have any advice for that?
I think it has to be something you like. Like it has to be not what you think is cool or what you think, I think it has to be kind of organic and authentic to if it's yourself or if it's your own company. I can't really speak to branding for other companies or other people. I'm all myself here, but yeah, I think it has to be, do you like it? Does it speak to you? And is it sort of in some way, does it show, your values? Like my logo is very clean. I'm a neat freak. Like there's a tie to these things. It's, organized, whatever. But I think looking at something that speaks to something that resonates with you as opposed to what you think, whoever your audience is, you don't really know. I mean, sometimes you don't know your audience until they approach you and you're like, oh, that's okay. Because that always is changing, at least in my little area. I stick more with staying true to my, instead of like rebranding all together, I might, on the composer, producer, engineer, studio owner, I might just lean more into one of those areas depending on which way the wind is coming from and, where you need to steer at the time. Because, the full rebrand, that's really hard. But I think keeping continuity, organic, authentic, it's really important.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone else have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think as an artist, I think you have to figure out what your sound is. If what your voice is as an artist. If you're a singer-songwriter, you probably don't want a logo that looks like Kiss's logo. That's very loud and edgy with fireworks coming out of it. But so you have to know who you are. The last thing you want to do is rush something. You're wasting your money to have your logo recreated, but then your branding changes every album. So it's something you really have to put thought into. But I agree that simplistic is sometimes better instead of going drastic and then having to pull that all back again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that thought. I also wanted to add, like, there's some really, there's some good resources out there to actually create that stuff for you. I mean, there's probably tons of college students right now who can't get summer jobs, who are dying for internships, and find a graphic design student to work with you on creating some graphics for you or your logo. I actually did a contest one time when I was the marketing manager at Korg, and we wanted a holiday card that was like specifically related to our brand. So I went to like, I think we went to NYU or something, the design school, and they did a contest and they created a really great piece of art for us and we gave them something. But there's resources like that. And then there's also things like Fiverr, where you can get really reasonable art created for you. And there's some easy apps you can use. I mean, logos are a little bit tricky, but then if you need like follow-up graphics, there's lots of resources. There's like free stock art too. Like pexels.com has free stock art. So just if you poke around.
Pixart is another one.
What is it?
Pixart, P-I-C-S
Oh, Pixar.
art. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
So look for.
Or Pixabay. That's it.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, so there's some cool, very reasonable or free resources. And then I also I'm like a member of a bunch of, women's entrepreneur groups, including on Facebook, and I see people sharing like, here's 4 logos somebody made for me. What do you guys think? And sometimes it's nice to get that outside point of view of something that's going to represent you, because you might be too close to it, especially if you like all of them and then you're like, what do I do? How do I pick? And then you can feel like if you're strongly disagreeing with the crowd, then you know that you like this other one. You're affirming to yourself. So anyway, that's something I've seen people do, is get some crowd input. Okay, so somebody asked about what should be on your website, and I guess that depends on what you're doing. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about what should be on your website as a musician, but do you guys have any sort of basics about, as far as like branding yourself or telling your story, like elements that you should make sure that are on your site?
Definitely having a bio section, telling a little bit about yourself. Make sure you have a contact page so people can contact you that way. On the musician side, links to your music and things like that. And then for other industries, just basically having, a products page if you're selling something, or, different bullet points about different services that you offer.
Any other suggestions?
For a studio, have studio pictures. For the longest time, I didn't have. I had some that I thought, oh, that's enough. And I had somebody approaching me for recording a quartet, and they couldn't tell from my pictures if the isolation room was big enough to do that. And I realized, oh, okay, like I need a dedicated studio photos page on my website so that people can actually, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, but I really somehow missed it. So it took having somebody approach me and wonder about it to actually put it on there. So
Yeah. I think too, like I'm a music journalist, so actually I'll post this link up later. I wrote an article about what should be on your website as a musician, because I was getting really frustrated by stuff that people submitted to me, and I didn't have like enough elements available. So I would suggest, like, if you are a musician, that you have like usable approved photos that a journalist could download to post with their articles, because I like can't even post anything without an image. So you don't want anybody to anyway. And also regarding what Danny said about the bio, like I like when there's a long bio and a short bio, because like sometimes I just want that one paragraph blurb, and I don't want to have to sort through, your 800 word bio to like make that myself. So you want to make it like easy for people to share about you. And then finally, one of the things that I really love is when people have the videos that they like linked from their site, because like sometimes I'd be writing an article and I'd be like, oh, I want to share a video of this person performing. I don't want to have to sort through, or like on your YouTube, have like your preferred list at the top. So I can just pick like, oh, I'll pick the featured song. Otherwise, I'm just going to pick whatever song. It might be the one that you hate that some guy films. I try not to use anything that isn't
officially on people's YouTubes, but so the more you can share and like say, this is the photo to use, this is the video to use, this is who I am, I think it makes it easier for people to share your story.
I think also to add to that, I've found that a lot of artists overlook their Facebook page. And I think it's good to have the short and long bio on there too, because sometimes booking agents, they just want to make everything real quick and easy and just will pull that from Facebook when they're making a Facebook event for their venue. So definitely it's important too.
Yeah, agree. And also like who you want somebody to contact. I actually love when I go to the about on Facebook and it says, here's my publicist. And I'm like, yay, don't have to dig any deeper. So yeah, that's a really good thought too. And we're going to talk lots more about social media in a little bit. Okay, so this is an interesting thought. Someone wrote, I usually find a very thin line between self-branding and simple bragging about what I've done and who I've worked with, etc. How do you see this, and what are the right ways to promote yourself while not making it sound repulsive? Does anybody have thought about that?
I mean, from a website perspective, I think it's fine to list clients if people want to see that. But if I'm doing an actual consultation, I personally won't say, oh, I worked with so-and-so unless it's in context for a marketing example specifically. But I think it's a turnoff, and it doesn't feel right within me to be like, oh, I've worked with so-and-so. Because that's not my objective. My objective is not to win someone over, it's to show them how I can help them, basically.
Yeah, and maybe like you said, who you worked with would be listed in your like client section
Yeah.
on your site. Anybody else have any thoughts about that?
When I was in engineering school, one of my instructors said one of the most important things that you'll learn to do is the elevator pitch, or the ability to have the most concise version of whatever applies in that moment. If you can, depending on who you're talking to, because I actually have been in the elevator at BMI talking to the head of blah, 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 where you have like 2 seconds to, like, they remembered who I am, like that we'd met before. And I could not believe that, you know, you have to be, you always have to have a little kind of like toy, you know, a bin of things that you can pull from real quick to be able to, you know, quickly connect and let people know who you are, what you do. But they said that, you know, my instructor was like, this is going to be one of the most uncomfortable things you'll have to do as somebody who isn't a braggy person, you know, where it feels kind of gross to be like, oh, you know, I just did this project or whatever it is. Like, you have to let people know what you do. So
True.
it's a good skill set.
But I agree with you. Sometimes, you know, you're at NAMM or something and you have to like spit out just to get people's attention, because it's like everyone's going which way. That's definitely, you know, a good way to do it. I don't think it's a negative way, because that's what you're there to do, is to network.
Exactly. But it feels, it does have that sort of feeling of like, oh, I'm boasting, you know, but no, you're not. You're trying to get like, just relating to people. Like, I think if that mindset is, you know, you're confident, you're like, this is what I've done, I'm proud of this work, I really enjoyed it. Like, however you can cushion it to make it not be like, here's my laundry list of really cool things I've done.
Exactly.
Gross.
We still want to hear them.
Yeah, but
I'll go to your website.
Relatable, yeah. Go to my website. A relatable way. So.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the thing is like finding how the other person can benefit from the thing that you want to share. You know, so Catherine, if you were like in the elevator and you're like, oh, you know, I just recorded this thing and I was thinking about your artists because like they had this common thing and this is how I did it and whatever. Like you relate it to something that's meaningful to the person. Even when I post on social media, you know, I did an interview or whatever, I try to couch it in like, oh, I did this interview and like this song that they talked about was so beautiful. It was so moving. Like, you have to hear this. And it's more about me wanting to share
their story or their music than saying, hey, look at me, I did this great interview. Like, you know, aren't I great? I mean, I do that too, but I have been called a shameless self-promoter, but I don't look at it that way. I just feel like there's a lot going on. You should know about it, because it's all awesome. But I do agree. I personally hate like name droppers, because when people drop names for no reason, like they're just trying to impress me, that's that fine line, right? It's when you can relate it to, oh, I did this project with this person, and that means I understand what your need is, you know? So yeah, that's my perspective on that. Okay, let's see. A person wrote, how do you overcome being rejected based on diversity? And I'm not sure which side of the diversity conversation that is. I think it's hard for everybody to be rejected based on anything beyond their skills and you know, experience. But do you guys have any thoughts about that? It's a big topic now, you know. No.
Well,
I mean,
it is hard.
It's
Because
hard.
I don't think
Yeah.
I think often, I mean, I don't know if, I think if I don't get a job, it's usually because my rates are too high for them. I'll be honest. Like, I don't know if that was I don't know I don't know the reason necessarily. Usually people say like, oh, that's not in my budget, or, oh, we'll circle back when we have a better budget, or whatever the case may be. But I don't think I ever know that, you know, you didn't get this job because X, Y, Z, you know, having to do with, you know, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, they didn't want to work with a woman or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
you don't, I mean, you're right. You don't always, or most of the time you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super
Right.
hard.
I think it's something like if you're going after a job and they see on your resume like you do have more than 3 skills, and say like I don't get hired for the job, I don't get offended. I think it's something on their end that they possibly should have to work on. Just because I haven't done strictly whatever for the past 10 years should not disqualify me. It's almost like they can't digest it. They don't have the ability to acknowledge something that's great. So I don't take it personally. It's just sometimes people aren't programmed that way, unfortunately. But
Yeah, I
if
think it's
it's
really tough. I think the best thing to do is just put yourself into spaces like this one where, you know, people are more open-minded. They're out there to help you find opportunities and to help you network. And, you know, if that's truly what you're told, oh, I don't want to work with you because you're a woman, whatever, then you don't want to work with them either. So, you know, you have to find better allies, I suppose. But it's super hard, and everybody hates to be turned down for any opportunity because of something like that. Okay, let's see. How can you brand yourself but sustain space for growth and change? What if you have broad interests and skill sets within your field that you would be miserable suppressing? When do you make the call that you are in fact more than one brand? That's a lot of questions in one. Let's start with the first one. How can you brand yourself but sustain space for growth and change? You guys have any thoughts on that?
I think as an artist, one thing I'm working on developing is the live streaming. It's not something that was a focus of mine before, but now, you know, with having to wait to perform live on a stage, it's definitely a skill set that I'm trying to work towards and make room for.
Yeah, I sort of see like life in general and work as constantly evolving, you know, so you might have this specialty now and dip your toe in the water with something else, you know, as an artist, as a business person. And that thing might develop into something else that you want to nurture, or you might be like, oh no, that's not for me. But I tried it and personally, I try like a million things and see what like sticks on the wall. Sorry, did it get loud in here? I'm in my bedroom and there's like people all around me. But anyhow, so I think, you can experiment and you can try new things and it doesn't necessarily become detrimental to your brand unless you allow it to. Does anybody have any other thoughts on that?
I think you don't know sometimes that like it doesn't fit in one bowl anymore until it starts going, boiling out of the, situation. I didn't realize I couldn't really do the studio and me in one page until I couldn't, until I realized like, oh, there really should be a dedicated studio page and there should be a dedicated me page. That there's definitely overlap, but they're definitely separate entities. And I don't think you necessarily know, you can't project, or maybe you can, I don't know, like, well, I'm going to do this one for the this me and this one for the that part, which is totally fine. But I think more often than not, it comes out of a necessity. Geez, I think I better kind of put this over into this part, and then that frees up the middle part for, you can kind of have more opportunity that way, actually.
Yeah, I don't think deciding on your brand necessarily means like you're done. It's sort of the starting point, not the finishing point, And I also feel like I've had circumstances where I've had like this discrete entity that I do, like the Women's International Music Network, separate from Men's on Marketing, and they'll spill together. There'll be some project where somebody's like, oh, you do marketing too? Like, hey, let me come on over there. So I especially think it's helpful if there's something related, like if you want to try something new, but it still somehow relates to what your core, brand is. That could be especially helpful. And who knows? You got to be adaptable for the future. Okay. Let's see. Is being too specific with your brand helpful or harmful when trying to gain followers? What do you guys think?
I guess I'd have to see it, but I think specific is good. If you know what your brand is, you know what your messaging is, I think it's better to attract your audience if you're an artist. Same with having products as well. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe as long as like that specific thing has like enough people interested in it, Sorry, somebody was going to speak.
I was just going to say, I think specific gains trust better than scattered. I think it's very hard to grasp, get a grip on if you're kind of putting this over here and this over here and this over here. If you're focused, it's like, oh, that's a stronger magnet than these ideas spraying around. It's like, wait a minute, what's happening? I don't know. I think erring on specific is far better than erring on scattered.
Yeah, it's interesting because I recently hired like an SEO consultant for my company, and I didn't want an agency that could do 20 things. I literally just wanted somebody who was like super down on SEO. So I rejected like more general possible partners because of that. So I'm with you. I think sometimes maybe you can do more things, but honing in on the specific things that you want to put to the forefront more is probably a good idea. Mm-hmm. Okay. Do a little bit more on branding, and then we're going to move to some talking about social media. What are some of the pros and cons of branding yourself as an individual versus a company when you are a sole trader? I guess it means when you're like a sole proprietor. Like, is it better to be you or a company? And I'm guessing they don't mean like business-wise, because that's a whole nother conversation. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? No?
Well, are they asking whether to work on your own or with a team of people?
I think they're asking like, okay, here's like an example. Like I'm me. When I started my marketing agency, I was still just me, but I called the company a company name. It wasn't like Laura Whitmore. It
Okay.
was Mad Sun Marketing. So I think what they're asking is it better to brand yourself as a company or as a person?
Both. I think you can do both because I started out as Planetwood Productions, where it was just really a studio website where people didn't actually know that I had anything to do with it. And then I'd also do, put the random flowers pictures and my dogs and stuff, and it just confused, I think, people generally. And by picking that, adjusting that to be me, and then splitting out the studio page to be studio. But I've got, publishing entity, BMI and ASCAP publishing. Yeah, I think that it is important for the business things, let them be business things. And for the you things, let that, you can brand all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I personally found it easier to like expand and add more people and do other things when I was a company. And I just left like my person for writing and music. Um, so maybe it depends on what your goal is too. And
Yeah.
is it world domination or is it just,
Of course.
or is it just today? I don't know. But yeah, I think that's very subjective.
Mhm.
Okay. What can you do to make your work more visible to artists and companies, and how could you be more likable to be hired from them? Likable. That's interesting. Let's talk about how can you make yourself more visible? I mean, that's more of like a marketing question in my head, but maybe that relates to branding. You guys have any thoughts on that?
I guess it depends on what your end goal is. Like if you're looking for a job, you probably want to make sure that your LinkedIn is up to date, and any social media sites that you have that are more on the professional side are presentable that way. Make sure that all your bios are up to date. Yeah, I would say for that. And on an artist side, just making sure like everything matches with the branding, with all the social media sites and Bandcamp, SoundCloud, and all the sites where you sell music too. I think sometimes when artists release music, they kind of forget about some sites that might be not as active for them to use. I think it's important to keep the branding consistent with that too.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have anything on hand that you want to share with people. So if it's you're sharing music, if you want to do more co-writes, have a folder for that, or you can just share instantly. Or if you're trying to do more artwork for people, marketing, etc., have things separated so you can send people what they need and have everything basically ready to go. The last thing you want to do is have a possible client or possible songwriter artist waiting for you for a week. So I think having everything ready to go is the best way to go. And I love what you said about have everything on your social medias branded, because that's your business card at the end of the day. So if everything is super sloppy, like, I don't know if I'd even want to email you because it's, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? It's like, you can do a lot of investigation through Google. You can see a lot of someone's services or songs through that. So it's important to just be on top of that.
Yeah, I would add like there was one point just a couple years ago where I had like a little bit of a slump in business and I was like, oh, how am I going to get more customers? I don't want to advertise, you know? So I decided to write a blog post and I think I posted it on my own like company website. It was about like, 10 tips for disruptive marketing in the music industry or something like that. And then I posted it on Facebook and I boosted it to members of NAM because that's my core audience. I was like, okay, I'm doing several things there. I'm like positioning myself as an expert in this field. I'm giving them like real information and tips that make them want to click through and read more. And I'm, knowing who I'm trying to be visible in front of. So it's like a soft way to like put myself in front of
the people that I wanted to hire me, and it totally worked. Like I got a bunch of business from doing that. So, you know, there's really interesting ways you can use the tools available today to become visible to the people that you want to see you. You know, it's hard now with us, everybody at home, but I always say like showing up is like 75% of the battle. Like I would go, you know, it's like, oh, I moved to a new place. I'll go to open mics. I'll meet new people. I got so many gigs from just being there and people seeing me sing and being like, oh, like, hey, we're doing this party. We need a singer. Like, hey, we're doing this project. So I'm not sure how to show up these days. There's probably, maybe you guys have some ideas. But it is a little bit harder to be visible right now, I think. Okay. I'm going to maybe shift our conversation a little bit over to social media. We've talked a little bit about this idea of professional social media versus personal, expert at. But can we talk a little bit about the different platforms perhaps, and some tips and thoughts about which are appropriate in which circumstances? Because there's a lot available now, and I'm sure all of us are like, what do we spend our time using? So does anyone want to start maybe talking about one or two platforms and what they find most useful about it?
I can start. I would say my philosophy with social media is to find what works for you, and focus on that first, and then you can chip away at the other social media sites that might be relatable to what you're doing. So I think, you know, for the most part across the board, Instagram and Facebook's important. You know, there's Twitter that, you know, you can sometimes, I feel for artists, it's good to have a Twitter set up, and if you want to tweet all day, go for it. But it's good to at least have it set up so that if somebody's writing about you, like a blog, and or, you know, a venue tags you on it, you can at least be notified for that. And I know just as far as a new platform, TikTok is becoming pretty popular with musicians as well, because you're able to share your music and potentially monetize your music that way. So yeah, a little overview on my end.
What do you guys think, Catherine or Sarah?
I think Instagram and Facebook are really good to find your audience, and I think they're really good avenues for networking. So you don't even have to use it just for your music, but to find more co-writes, look at a new distribution company. Sometimes I see companies launch first on Instagram. Like that's how I find out about them first, and it's awesome, you know, because I could be like the first artist or consultant to work with them just because you show interest. I also think Twitter's great, like more in the PR world sometimes, just for resharing. So there's different ways you can use social media, but I think you should be using those for sure. In terms of TikTok, I have not figured that out yet. So I'm gonna sit back and watch.
I just joined TikTok to kind of see what was going on, and yeah, it's like a rabbit hole. I was entertained for sure. I don't want to be doing any of those videos, but they were funny.
I think it's very useful. All the different platforms have their usefulness, and for me, Twitter is more news oriented for retweeting, or, you know, letting people know about events or something like that. But I don't do a lot of really communication per se on that platform. I use my personal Facebook really for vetting people. Like, do we know people in common? You know, it's slightly personal, but it's kind of turned into also a business page in addition to my studio business page. And Instagram is, I think, by far the most useful tool for, at least for my business, for showing, you know, the whole picture, 1,000 words. It's a lot easier for people just to see the picture. Oh, you know, see your followers. Oh, it's just so simple. It's like so straightforward. But I think for artists, especially, I think TikTok can be I don't really know anything about how it works, but I've seen people reshare on Instagram some of the TikTok, and that they're funny. It seems really funny to me
You're very
to
clever.
be entertained. But
And I think you have to like think about, what are you trying to accomplish and where's your audience, right? So from my perspective, it's like I'm probably not going to find marketing clients posting on TikTok, but on Facebook, I'm a member of a lot of industry groups that I've actually found to be super helpful and great resources. If you post in there saying, "Hey, I'm looking for this," or does anybody need that? And like people will step up a lot and offer advice and link you to other people. And so I use Facebook a lot, probably because I'm older, but I'm very comfortable with Facebook. Some of them I'm not so comfortable with. I do
think
have I have
you,
everything though,
okay.
but yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Danny.
I was just going to say, also YouTube, if you're open to doing any sort of tutorials or any sort of helpful videos, that can be really great tool, and you can utilize that across the other platforms too, to get your
Yeah,
message across.
and like the Women's International Music Network, we have tons of videos on YouTube, and our YouTube actually gets really great traffic. So it's a something that we use to share what we're doing and what we have coming up. And I think that there's some tricks to using YouTube in that way. Like you have to kind of nurture it in a different way than you do Facebook. Like anything, you have to learn the tricks. Someone asked, what is the best platform to be using for personal marketing / networking? Do you guys have any? This is personal marketing.
I've had a lot of success with Facebook. A lot of my clients are actually from referrals from Facebook, just putting a post up saying like, hey, I make websites, and then people will tag different people in that. So I found that personally for me to be really great. And then Instagram's been really helpful for me to find collaborators musically. I found different producers that I've collaborated with from all over the world through there, and different people to remix my music as well.
That's cool. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? I mean, I personally like to use LinkedIn for like business networking, but I don't like to troll anybody I don't somehow know. Like I typically, before this circumstance we're in now, I would meet people at conferences or whatever, and then I would link in with them so I could like nurture that relationship, but I wouldn't reach out if I didn't know them. Although I will say that I reached out to a journalist to review a product at a huge media outlet through LinkedIn, and they said yes. So I guess that's a way to if you have the right pitch, to meet people, as well, if you're being thoughtful about how you're using it. Do you guys use LinkedIn?
a little.
Yeah. I used to find like it was really great if I was traveling and I had like, an afternoon off. I would look in my LinkedIn and say like, oh, I'm going to Chicago. Who do I know in Chicago? Maybe I'll just go have a cup of coffee with them and shoot the breeze and see what they're doing. Maybe there's something I don't know about. And that was great with LinkedIn because you can sort it by where people are. I have also used it to see like, oh, gee, I want to do some marketing in Japan. Like, who do I know in Japan? Do they know anybody in marketing? Like, let me see if I can, people that they might know that are like my secondary contacts. So I like to maintain my LinkedIn because I find it useful, like human resources kind of tool. So that's my 2 cents about that. Do you miss out on opportunities by not using the latest social media like Instagram and TikTok, for example?
I think so. I've gotten probably like 75% of my marketing gigs through Facebook. And it's either from me posting and then someone else will see my post that's not even affiliated with what I posted about. And I guess it's the same for Instagram too. It's just that networking And if you're not being proactive, or if you're just not on there looking, like there's so much out there. It's a different world. So I'm definitely on it hours a day, unfortunately. Yeah.
I think it's hard because you have to, like, you can't do everything great, right? Like, you couldn't be on all social media platforms by yourself and be great at it. So how do you choose? Like, what's the area that you're great at? You know, maybe it's just what you feel the most comfortable doing. I don't know. You guys have thoughts on that? Sarah's on everything. She's great at everything.
I think it depends what it is. Like you had mentioned, Facebook is a networking place for you, and LinkedIn for vetting, you know, who you might want to chat with. And I think that's very valid. Like, you know, what is the best use for it? You know, so like for events, RSVPing to events, you see who might be there, even if they're webinars, whatever it is. Like I have a webinar that I'm going to after this, you know, it's become like I'm going to an event, you know, just like we're here right now. Like,
yeah.
And this is a way of actually visibility, because I can see everybody's name on this list right now, you know, and I'm curious about who are all these people, you know, and that is a way to be visible. But for the platforms, I mean, even using Zoom in this way, actually, right now, you know, that is a way to do a lot of things.
Yeah, my sense is it's good to have like at least a working knowledge of the platform so that you know when something might be a good fit for something that you want to do. Like you said, Sarah said, like Instagram, you know, may be really great for sharing new music, exploring, you know, producers, or like I know artists who are so good at branding themselves on Instagram. Everything is beautiful and consistent and really lets people know what their identity is as a musician. So I mean, because of the graphic nature of that platform, they just fit in so good there. I wouldn't do that for me, but I think that's, you know, but just having some experience with all the platforms, I think is really helpful, even if it's just for entertainment. Let's see. How can one stay consistent with social media presence when not every day has social media ready content to be documented? You guys have any thoughts on that?
Can you read it again?
Yeah. It says, how can one stay consistent with social media presence when not every day has social media ready, quote unquote, content to be documented?
Don't participate every day.
Yeah, number one.
Is that do it on the story, you know,
Yeah.
and then it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be presentable necessarily.
I mean, I don't necessarily think you only have to present content about yourself either. I mean, you can share other people's content.
Sure.
You can comment on other people's stuff.
But sometimes too much is too much.
Yeah. I mean,
know.
Sorry, go ahead.
One of my friends, he's an artist. I'm name dropping almost, but he's fairly big. But he's been resharing everything for the past 3 or 4 weeks due to Black Lives Matters and everything that's been going on. So he's not generating any content on his own. So it doesn't have to be specific to your voice, or I mean, coming from your mouth. You know, you can reshare other things that are pertaining to your artistry or your product, your company, and that still gets the message across. Or do stories or like a brief IG live, just checking in with people. But I think what's important is to not stop, because you don't want to lose that movement on social media.
Yeah, agree. I think you probably don't, I mean, you don't have to post every day, but you definitely want to be consistent. And, you know, if you stop for weeks, that's bad. So you got to keep on top of it. Let's see. Oh, that's the next question. How often should you be posting and interacting on your social media? I would say
think
like
it
never post and like leave your post and don't look at your comments. Don't do that. Go ahead.
I think it depends on the platform and what it is. I would say with Instagram posts like once a day at the most. And then Instagram stories is like Twitter. You can kind of post away as much as you want. And Facebook, I would stick to about one post a day at the most. And that's just like, you know, my outlook on it. I know it varies from industry to industry for that.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have any thoughts about that?
I think it depends if you're in a aggressively building audience mode or maintaining your plateau mode. So if you're not trying to actively grow, I'll leave my Instagram page for weeks not posting anything until I have the right thing to. I'm not just going to post something. I'm very, very selective about what I put up because it's telling a story intentionally, and I'd rather leave it for a while and maintain my followers by having them engage with my stories. And then because I've at least found if you do too much, actually people leave, or it's not, so intentionally posting with at least a few days in between actually for a growth moment is better than too much. But I don't think weeks is actually bad depending on what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. Like if you're using your Instagram kind of like a website where you're just like, okay, this is who I am, this is what I do. You don't necessarily have to be pushing it every day to try to grow your following. That's like a different outcome that you're looking for. It's more of like a billboard for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a question. How do you navigate your comments? It can be incredibly psychologically damaging and is something I dread when I become more public. Do you have someone help you? Anybody have thoughts on dealing with comments on social media?
I think it depends what you're posting. If you're posting something that's maybe controversial or very, very engaging, where it's inviting the conversation, then I think it's good to be prepared to have the discussion that that would be the meaning for the post, I would think. Or you can create posts that have just like, oh, what a cool blah blah, or you're just getting like positive thumbs up, extra encouragement. That's easy to like or heart or whatever. And so it depends on what kind of discussion you're wanting to engage in. But if I think that then it ranges on, how are you delivering your question, or are you framing it positively? Are you framing it in a combative way? I mean, everybody posts differently. I think it really depends on what the goal is of the post, and then being prepared to have the conversations with people. I would think.
Yeah, we look at like things like, if there's somebody that's being really abusive, you can block them. You can delete their comment. You can hide their comment. They won't even know that you hit it. You can do those things.
Sure.
But if it's somebody that you want to sort of engage with, it's better to IM them and not have it all be on your page, because that like leads to others joining in weird ways. So we found like, if you want to be like, hey, I'm going to DM you, and then have your conversation somewhere else. Like that can be a way to diffuse those people, because then they're like, oh, wait, like, now I'm dealing just directly with this one person and not like, hey, look at me, I'm being belligerent,
100%.
So that is a way that you can. I always think of, what's that comedian, Sarah Oh, can't think of her name. Where she
Silverman?
Silverman, where she would like totally go out and diffuse these people that were just trolling, um, and make them and become, supporters. It's truly amazing, like what you can do if you have the guts to like confront some of these people. Some of them you don't want to do that, um, but I say block them.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's your page,
exactly.
Okay, I got one more question on here, and then maybe we'll take some questions from our virtual audience. Um, okay. I would love to get your thoughts on how and when to use your artist name, your personal name. We talked about this a little bit. Your artist name, your personal name, and your company name on social media without getting too scattered in your messaging, too many separate accounts. It's that whole, multiple personality thing that we all have. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Is there any ways that you deal with,
I had to make a decision with this when so Danny Marie is actually not my full name, but it was my stage name when I was a folk performer. And I was switching to be more of a electronic artist, and I changed my stage name to be Primitive Heart. So rather than have separate music pages for my folk music and a separate one for Primitive Heart, I just changed my Instagram, YouTube, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, everything to Primitive Heart, and have that living there. And then my Danny Marie is my website and my personal Facebook page. And I just made that decision because I felt like it was easier to manage, and I can kind of separate my music from my professional life that way.
Mhm. I find it's really hard. I mean, I'm very specific about what gets posted where, but I'm the first person to neglect all of my personal stuff in favor of taking care of my business. Do you guys have any other thoughts about that? Your artist name, your personal name. People have different comfort levels with that, Okay. Well, I'm going to look and see if there's any other questions in the chat that Carrie posted for me to share. Let's see what's in here. Carrie. Okay, here's one. We'll see if we know anything about it. She posted, how do you feel about intertwining disciplines? In my case, I have a band, and I also recently started Twitch streaming where I play games, but with discussions about music or as a platform to promote my releases by playing my music as a soundtrack to the games I play. Intertwining disciplines, I think, is awesome. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I love it. From like a marketing and brand partnership standpoint, I think it's a really cool opportunity to market. And if you can get a partnership on board, I think that's huge. Like there's so much you can do with that, especially if it's official. And I know like some of the Twitch streamers, like they make so much money. So anything that's outside the box, it's like what we were talking about earlier, like never stop the creativity just because it's something different. Like that's why we get all these changes in the industry, because people do something that's different. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I think that makes you like, that's a great point of differentiation for you as a brand. It's like, oh, I'm on Twitch, but I'm a musician and I can game and also talk about music. That's cool. That's a cool like positioning for you. Um, so I mean, to me, that makes sense, and it puts you in front of like a lot more eyeballs. So as long as the Twitch people aren't like, what if, they're not bashing you for it or something. Even if they are, too bad. Do you guys have any other thoughts on that? I'm going to keep looking at these questions.
It just seems like a good opportunity to highlight uniqueness, which is your unique brand. So I agree.
Okay, here's another question. We'll see if we know anything about this. I manage an Instagram account for a theatrical sound trade group, interested in getting our message out to young sound designers and get them inspired and informed about us. Okay, so maybe some tips for, this is from Becca. about using Instagram to get the word out to young theatrical and sound designers about her theatrical trade group?
I think using hashtags on Instagram can be really helpful. Also, maybe find other groups that are similar to you and tag them in some posts. See if you guys can work together on that. I think it's a couple good ways.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe like if you have some young sound designers that can sort of be your ambassadors, they can start sharing what you're doing and who you are, and you can collaborate. Um, they probably know how to like navigate Instagram like wizards. So, okay. Any other thoughts before I check out another question? Okay, cool. From Samantha, she asks, what is one aspect, it's moved. What is one aspect of your brand that you overlooked when you first started to establish yourself? Anybody have a thought on that?
For me, it was my website. I just kind of put something up in the beginning. And once I transitioned my website over to a more professional looking one, I saw a lot of more people emailing me. And like, I didn't really care about my website before. And then it was like, okay, presentation is everything. And I should have known that. But it was a game changer for me.
Okay, that's a good thought. Anybody else have any thoughts about that?
I think one thing I overlook a lot of times is a newsletter. It could be hard to keep up with it, but I think it's important to send it out once a month when you can, so that you can. It's the one opportunity you really have to get at least the headline of the email across to somebody without all the noise of social media.
It's a great idea. I also feel like gathering email contact information is really important, and I find like a lot of people sort of don't do that, don't have that, sign up for a newsletter or whatever it is to get that contact information. And I think that's super helpful in continuing to message about who you are. Any other, Catherine, you have any thoughts about that?
Sorry, what was
Or
the question?
did you come out fully formed? The question was,
No, hardly.
what one aspect of your brand that you overlooked when you first, what is one aspect of your brand that you overlooked when you first started to establish yourself?
Well, it was so long ago. It was really before social media. So actually the visibility part, I didn't really know how to take my experience and translate that into being visible. So, as a direct answer to the question, visibility, I didn't really know how to take advantage of the vast experience that I had and translate that into a way that could resonate with people. I just didn't know, because yes, you have the website that shows whatever it is, but I'm not an artist per se. I'm really more of a studio and the person who operates in the studio. So it's like, how do I show that? And things like social media have made it much easier to do that. So, but initially it was figuring out how to link to the visibility factor and then concisely use that to my advantage.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, from my own perspective, like I was in the music industry for 20 years before I started my own agency. And I was like, oh, I know, I've been in the industry for so long, this won't be hard. But I was in an internal position where I didn't meet a lot of people in the industry. And that was my mistake, that I wasn't visible enough. I didn't network enough. So it took me a couple of years to, get out there, learn how to network, learn how to, figure out how to resonate in the conversation with somebody, that thing about what the mutual benefit is. I think I actually teach a seminar, like a workshop on networking, because I think like young people especially, they don't know how to network. It's sort of terrifying.
Mhm.
especially if you're not like an extrovert, to like figure out like how do you break the ice? What do you talk about? How do you, how do you make the ask? It's hard. It's a hard thing. So that
Especially in a social industry like
yeah,
this, and especially for at least LA based, it's mandatory to be able to understand how to navigate, and it's highly, highly social. And you're right, the networking aspect it's
it's critical.
essential.
Yeah. And it's like it's a really fine line between being annoying and being having a conversation. This is cool. Oh, wait, we have this in common. That's nice. Oh, maybe I could help you. Maybe you could help me. I don't know. But like it's really hard to learn how to do it and not be awkward.
Definitely.
So anyway, so practice networking. And I will also say that, okay, maybe you guys can contribute this before we're done. My favorite business book that I've ever read is called The Power of Nice. And in it, it's this little book. I have it here. I should have brought it. It's a little yellow book with like a smiley face on it. But it's about using kindness and niceness in business to get what to move forward. And it actually has exercises where you practice being nice and communicating and reaching out verbally to people in the world. And it was awesome. It was an awesome way to sort of move to like a new place in business for me. Do you guys have a favorite business book or website or blog that you like? No?
No,
I don't go
I can't think
externally,
of
but
any
I
right now.
definitely agree with the positive, keep it positive. So much has to do with vibe. Like nobody wants to work with somebody who has a bad vibe, period. Like, and it's harder to tell on the electronic version now, but positivity is so important. It's also essential. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. Okay, well, I think that's probably it for tonight. Carrie, is there anything else you would like us to talk about before we go? She's not saying. So if you want to hang out for a minute, I'm going to drop a couple links in the chat. I just have to open up my Word document that I worked on for this project and dump them in there. A couple articles that I found useful and helpful. But I want to thank you guys so much for joining and sharing your insight, and great to get to know you.
Too.
All right, well, thanks everybody. Let me just grab this stuff. So this is my article about what you want on your website. And I just listed some tips in here. Let's see, it says type a message here. Is it going to let me do that? Oh, no. It won't. Oh, everyone. Now let's see. All right, well, maybe it's not going to let me do that. I'll have Carrie to share it with you. It's technology at work for you or not. Okay. Oh, wait, here we go. All right, that's a great article, or a good one. It's great because I wrote it, but it's also helpful. And then here's an article I found about branding for musicians that I thought was really pretty well done. So I'll just dump in here. Okay. All right, thanks everybody. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, take care.